Welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and joining me today is Dan Drew, the newly elected mayor of Middletown, Connecticut. And it's just a real pleasure to have you here today.
It's
Dan.
great to be here. I love being back up on the college campus, and I have some memories here going back to my teen years, so it's always nice to come back up here.
Tell me what you were doing here in your teen years.
Well, I took an EMT class when I was a senior in high school, and all my licensing exams and some of the end coursework and the end tests were done here at Middlesex Community College for the entire state. So I came here and took all my tests, the practicum, the written exam, and then I had to wait about 2.5 months to find out that I had passed, which was good. Mm-hmm. But it's always great to be back up here. How
old were you when you did that, if I might ask?
18.
That's, and because what you confront as an EMT is pretty, complicated, and there's a high tension, high stress. You must have a high degree of ability to cope with stress.
It was a harrowing job in many ways. I volunteered on an overnight crew primarily every Saturday night at 7 p.m. to Sunday morning at 7 a.m. So we were on call for 12 straight hours, and then I'd pick up additional shifts throughout the week for the remainder of my high school career, and then through college when I was home from the University of Connecticut, where I attended as an undergraduate. And there were some horrible cases that I saw. In particular, there was one where a girl that I was in high school with was killed the week before graduation in a terrible car crash, and I was on that call. And there was one 3 weeks later where I'd seen another peer killed in another car accident. And so it was a very difficult assignment in many ways, but it was rewarding because there were opportunities where we literally were the difference between life and death for some people. So that was an extraordinary opportunity to help.
Right. It's the whole idea of being a first responder. You're the ones on the scene. So yeah, very, very important. And we obviously came to understand it even more during 9/11. And first responders are often the ones who are trained through community colleges. So that's a real special role, I think, that community colleges play.
Very important role. And, it gives the community that volunteer aspect, that togetherness aspect, and provides people with a really important skill. But, I did it as a volunteer. You can make a great career out of it as well.
That's right. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I've got a whole bunch of questions, hundreds of questions I'd love to ask you, but we only have a half hour here. So welcome back. With me today is Dan Drew, the new mayor of Middletown, Connecticut, and we're just getting started talking about lots of things that I have questions about, and I think I want to begin with, when did you in your life begin to think that you might be a leader in school or a leader in college? Ultimately, something must have started you thinking about a career path that would take you to a leadership role like the mayor. And since you're a young mayor, I'm especially interested because I'm one of my passions in life is to encourage people to be involved in the democratic process. Certainly as voters, but we need leaders too. So can you talk about that evolution in your own life?
For me personally, it was about public service, and it's always been about public service since childhood, really. I'd say, when it really started to come together for me in a very active way was in middle school, getting involved in student government, and then getting on to high school, becoming involved in student government. And then I began to work as a lifeguard for the town where I grew up, which isn't far from here. It's only about an hour away in Connecticut, in Western Connecticut. As I said earlier, got involved. That led me to be interested in work as an EMT. And so just always been interested in public service. After I got into college, I began working in journalism at UConn and did some investigative work, and then later went on. Actually, I did the investigative work after I graduated from college. So I did some investigative work that led to the indictment of a corrupt public official. I had some great experiences in just various public service capacities, but serving in government was something I was always interested in because it's such a hands-on way to affect real change quickly, where you have a direct hand in the direction that you want to take a group of people. And we have a great community here, and I think that we have tremendous potential to move in that direction, and I really wanted to be a key player in helping us gain that forward momentum.
Did your parents influence you at all in that regard?
To some extent. They were always very supportive of anything I wanted to do. They always encouraged everything I wanted to do. They always urged me to volunteer for community organizations and a lot of things like that I'd gotten involved in over the years. And they always they never said go into politics. They never said try to get elected to an office, but they always did encourage me to become involved in the community and to work to do whatever I could to help move any community that I was a part of forward.
Well, communicating is a really core skill for any good leader. So I'm very intrigued by the idea that you were working in newspaper. Right? Did you work at the
Yes,
Yukon student newspaper?
I worked at the Yukon student newspaper first as a sports reporter. Actually, the way I got started there was kind of funny. I was kind of broke at the time. I think I was a sophomore, and I had gone and bought a grinder at Ted's Deli. And any of your listeners out there that went to Yukon will know about Ted's Deli. And I lived in a house just behind there. And I got home one day in January, and it was about 5 degrees outside, and this blustery wind that rips through stores, and my ears felt like they were going to crack off. It was one of those days. And I sat down with the newspaper, and there was an ad that said, "Do you like sports?" And I said, "Sure, I like sports." And it said, "Do you like money?" And I said, "Sure, I like money." And it said, "Well, come right for sports." It was a pretty straightforward ad. So I got involved in the sports department, and then from there I moved over to the news department, and I was reporting on the little bit on the Yukon baseball team. Mostly, I think it was field hockey for a while too. I can't remember exactly what it was, but then I started working in the sports department, the news department after the sports department, and then I got promoted to news editor for the following year, and then the year after I got promoted to editor-in-chief, and ended up taking on the newspaper in a time when, and this was completely run by students, so I actually ended up having the job, which ended up being pretty much full-time.
Yeah, I know it can be. Right.
Turning the organization around financially, because it wasn't actually officially a part of the school. It's an independent 501c3 operation.
Interesting.
So the budget was in major trouble when I took over. We had a major debt we incurred to our printer.
Because of loss of advertising sales?
Loss of advertising sales, loss of collection of advertising sales that had gone through. We actually, when I took over, were in a position where there were several advertisers that had to close their books for the year, and they were begging to pay us, and our collection system was so bad that we weren't taking in the money people were begging to give us. So when I took over, we completely first thing we did was I ordered the news department to write an article about our financial trouble.
Good idea.
We would have done it about anybody else. So we ended up reporting on ourselves, which I think really helped us build some trust in the community. And at that point, we redid our collection system, we redid our billing system, we redid the entire marketing department, and we started aggressively collecting all of the money that we were owed, and we started aggressively selling new ads, and then working on quality improvement in the news section, and ended up, I think, making more than 2/3 profit above what we had to collect that year. So we ended up paying off everything, turning the budget around, and making a major profit.
That's wonderful.
I mean, if you can use the word profit, it was a 501c. We'll call it surplus.
Surplus.
It was a 501c3, and we ended up making a major surplus on it. And
was it a daily?
It was a daily, 5 days a week. It didn't come out on the weekends, but.
So did you like the life in the editor's office or in the newsroom or in the production area? What was it? Was it pretty intense?
It was very intense, and it was interesting. You know, I like an intense atmosphere, but journalism was never really the place for me long term, personally. I liked the leadership role at the paper. I liked confronting the challenges of being on the financial precipice and turning it around. And I do enjoy writing very much. But the craft of journalism, the business of journalism was never where I wanted to be long term. But after I graduated from UConn, I did go to work in a newspaper because that's where the jobs were. And that was one of the only places jobs were right after I graduated. So
where'd you go?
The Potomac News, just outside Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
Which was it was a great experience because I was thrown into, almost immediately, the Washington sniper case just a few months after I graduated from UConn. And ended up being our newspaper's lead reporter on that because they put me on the police and crime beat, which is a place where they put a lot of the new reporters to sort of cut your teeth and get into the experience of being a daily reporter in an intense environment. And this was a relatively high crime area in the Washington suburbs. And then we had the sniper case hit. So I ended up being the lead reporter on that case because it was in my beat for that newspaper, and ended up following the case from the beginning through the end. And even through its conclusion in the court system. I had gotten to go into jail and see John Allen Muhammad, the sniper, in his cell. Went to several court appearances with he and Lee Boyd Malvo, who was his co-conspirator. A few months after, I was a witness to an execution, the Jarrett Correctional Facility in Virginia.
Oh.
So, it was an experience where I had gone from being in a collegiate environment into this high stakes, high-paced environment where I was competing with reporters from the New York Times and the Washington Post, and a very interesting experience, very interesting time for me personally. But I learned a lot from it.
And what made you decide to leave that job?
My wife and I wanted to come back to Connecticut. This is where I'm from, and this is where we wanted to settle down. So we came back, and I worked at the Connecticut Post in Bridgeport for a while. And then I wanted to get out of journalism, and I went into the nonprofit arena.
And what did you do in the nonprofits?
Grants. My job was to go after grant funding and develop programs and ensure that we would be able to fund self-sufficiency programs and education programs, sort of transitioned out of journalism.
And are you keeping a link with that organization that you were working with, or do you move fully into being the mayor?
Oh, no, I've moved fully into.
So, of course, as you were campaigning, I'm sure you were sort of developing a stronger philosophy of how you were going to be a mayor and what the issues were that were going to be highest on your agenda. So can you talk a little bit, maybe first of all, about your philosophy as being a mayor? What are the kind of core guiding principles that you have?
Well, I believe very strongly in a strong middle class. You know, I came from the middle class. I went to public schools, elementary school, middle school, high school, and through college. And so to me, you know, the foundation of the United States of America is a strong middle class. And I think that without a strong middle class, it's not the America that we recognize. It's not the Connecticut we recognize. It's not the Middletown we recognize. So my top priority is to make life easier for the middle class. And how do we do that? One of the ways is we have to make sure that living here is more affordable. And so I'm working right now on some tax relief strategies, particularly a tax relief program for senior citizens, because senior citizens have been hit particularly hard by the property tax system that we have here and the increases that we've seen over the last several years. And one of the things that I think is worth pointing out, you know, some people say to me, well, you know, that's strange for a Democrat to be against, you know, tax increases. And I said, well, it's not really strange if you think about it, because if you transpose the idea of federal taxes where you have an income tax that is somewhat progressive income tax, and then you're looking at the way that we tax here locally, what we have essentially is a regressive flat tax locally, and that's sort of the antithesis of the progressive ideal that's based on developing your middle class. So when you have a regressive flat tax that hits everybody across the board, and it's increasing at an unsustainable pace for your middle class and your seniors and your young families, that's where it really hits you hard. And so that's why, you know, we're starting to look at ways that we can try to ease that burden while working within the confines of a system that we're bound to by Connecticut general statutes. So until the legislature decides to change the way that we deal with funding our governments locally, we're going to have to do everything we can on the local level to make sure that we ease the burden for our citizens.
Boy, I want to hear more about that. I'm afraid we have to take a break right now, but we'll be right back and we'll talk about the middle class. Welcome back. Today with me is Dan Drew, the mayor of Middletown, and we've been talking about measures he's thinking about that will try to restore the strength of the middle class, which is a huge issue in our country. So let's talk a bit more about your ideas about property tax and what kinds of relief strategies you might have in mind.
Well, one of the things we're looking at right now is a property tax relief program for senior citizens. And we're looking at the details of the various options and crunching the numbers and figuring out what's going to work best for the city budget. The program I proposed during the campaign was a three-pronged program. It consisted of any one of three choices that a senior could select, and you only get to select one. And this has worked in other communities in Connecticut. The first option is a tax freeze, where your taxes are frozen at the level at which they are now, and they'll never go up on you again for the rest of your life. The second option is a deferral program, where you defer a portion of your payment by leveraging the equity in your home, and then you can put off part of the payment for a while and not feel the effects of it. The third option is a credit program for volunteer service in the community. All three work. We're looking at what works right now. We may start off with a freeze. We're still working through the numbers and figuring out what's going to work. But at a minimum, we expect to present legislation for a freeze to the council for approval. The way the program works is it gives people choices. So if you're planning on staying in Middletown for the rest of your life, the freeze option is probably the best one for you. I spoke with several people during the campaign who are just recently retired that are going to do another few years here and probably look at moving south or west. If that's your option, then the deferral program works best for you because you can save more in the short term, and then when you go to sell your house, you can make up the difference to the city, and it works well for everybody. And the credit option works well also. I know several people who are retired that spend a lot of time volunteering. I just saw one this morning actually at the Russell Library as we were going through, and you can get a credit for some of that kind of work if that's your choice. And it would give people a lot of options, and it would allow them to pick what works best for them.
Sure.
But right now we're making sure we're figuring out the details of what's going to work best, and then we're going to make a presentation.
It's interesting that seniors, some of them at least that you've spoken with, are thinking about migrating out south and west. By south, you mean out of the state altogether?
Well, by south, I mean Florida, Mississippi,
right.
Texas.
Warmer climates.
South Carolina. I've been hearing a lot about South Carolina from people, and they have great fishing there, so I can't blame some people.
Right.
I caught a shark in South Carolina last year.
Wow.
But, there are some people that are thinking about moving for various reasons. Some people just want to be in a warmer climate. Some people don't like Connecticut's tax system. So there are a variety of reasons, but I have heard of several people who are planning on moving south or west. And that's a trend that doesn't just affect Connecticut. I think in northern climates that is becoming a much more common occurrence than it was in the past, in part I think because of the spending power of the baby boom generation. As the baby boom generation begins to retire, they're a lot more financially secure than their parents were. And in many cases, they have defined benefit pensions, or they have good savings or good investments, and they find that their money is leveraged more in other places, or they're just more interested in a warmer climate. Whatever the reason is, I think the trend is escalating on the national level. I know.
And to some degree, there's a kind of a brain drain, I guess, if you think about all the knowledge and history and skills that are embedded in this group of people who, speaking about the baby boom, who are maybe 65 to whatever, to the highest ages. People are living to be 100 very commonly anymore, but they still have so much that they can give back to a community. So you want, I would think, in the end, you want as balanced a group as possible. Lots of little children on the lower age level, and then the seniors on the upper, and then the broad group of people who are working at jobs and sort of promoting the commerce and industry in the community. Yeah, so this goes back to the middle class. So what other issues do you see on the horizon having to do with the middle class and trying to build it back up?
Economic development and job creation. The best thing I think we can do for the middle class long term is make sure that there are plenty of good jobs.
Right.
And when I say good jobs, I don't mean the kinds of jobs where a politician will add a few minimum wage jobs to the rolls and then claim victory. I'm talking about the kind of job where you can raise a family, where you'll have a decent health plan, where you'll have some retirement options. And that's the kind of job that we need to get back here. Jobs in the green sector, jobs in manufacturing, jobs in biotech and research, R&D. These are the kinds of jobs that we're going to need to attract here in the future. And we need to make sure that we position ourselves so that we're attractive to the companies and the businesses that are going to be creating those kinds of jobs. Because while we are experiencing somewhat of a brain drain, we also still have a workforce that can't be matched elsewhere in the country. We have educational institutions here that can't be matched elsewhere in the country, and we have a great network of, right here in Middletown, we have Middlesex and Wesleyan. That's a very powerful combination.
It is.
And it's something that we should be capitalizing on. And, a town in part of Florida may not be able to boast of that same kind of combination with the same access to the transportation corridors that we have here, with access to two cities like New York and Boston, with all of the other industries around us. So there's a lot of research capacity here, there's a lot of technical know-how, and we need to provide incentives for companies that are in those fields to start growing here at a faster rate. And if we can do that, then the jobs are going to come with those companies. And when those jobs come with those companies, those jobs will be filled by middle-class people. And we have right here in town, Pratt & Whitney. Pratt & Whitney builds the F-22, which is currently on hold. They build the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. These are aircraft that are incredibly sophisticated from a technological standpoint. And those companies and the companies all along their supply chain, they employ engineers, graphic designers, accountants, attorneys, artists, writers, technical writers, PR people, communications people. These are all well-paying jobs. Those jobs all have good benefits, and those are the kinds of companies that we need to work hard to get here. It's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight, especially in this economy. But we have the ability, I think, because of all of the assets that we have going for us, to capitalize on those assets and insulate ourselves to the best extent possible against this worldwide economic downturn.
I hope so, and I hope you'll consider Middlesex Community College a partner in that, because we really want to be involved. I sometimes I'm very worried about the super committee that was unable to identify ways to reduce the national budget by maybe $2.3 trillion. And so if this, the worst case scenario were to unfold, the defense industry, for example, will be hit heavily. And coming from the Midwest, where the defense industry is sort of invisible if it exists at all, it's been very overwhelming to me to see how often in the Hartford Courant, which I try to read all the time, in the Middletown paper as well, the corporations that are involved in defense contracts are many here. And so that will have a negative impact, I would think, long-term on the economy of the state if the federal government does cut the Pentagon by about $500 billion, something. The amount is so astronomical. I'm probably
they're hard numbers to wrap your head around.
They are hard numbers to wrap our heads around. But I wonder, long-term, if maybe it's because I'm an old-style idealist, if we were to transition to a peace economy of some kind, that we would also be looking at other kinds of industries. On the other hand, it's clear that defense is a core part of the economy here.
It's a core part of the economy, and it's going to continue to be a core part of the economy, but it can't be the only part that we rely on. And that's sort of speaking to we don't know what's going to happen in Washington, and the truth is that we have very little control over what happens in Washington. So we need to, I think, on the presumption that those industries are going to keep going strong, and that we know that no matter what level we're talking about, defense will continue to be a major part of our economy.
Sure.
We need to focus on that as one part of our overall strategy. Those companies, like Pratt & Whitney, for example, also has very strong commercial applications. And that's also going to be continuing because worldwide commerce relies on transportation, and you have to rely on air transportation to make it happen. So there is going to be business there, and so we need to pursue that business. But it's like anything, with your personal stock portfolio, you're going to want to diversify it. So we're going to want to diversify our economy, which is why when we talk about economic development, and when I look at our possible plans for economic development, I'm talking about aerospace as a whole, not just defense aerospace. So we'll have, hopefully commercial and defense applications. But we're also looking at the development of green jobs, alternative fuels. There's a fuel cell company in Danbury that employs hundreds of people, and they have high-tech fuel cell technology. United Technologies Corporation has a fuel cell division. These companies are growing in the new alternative energy field, and there's a lot of know-how here that they can tap into. So that's something that we want to look at.
And I believe that we will get there. We just have to keep pushing in that direction. The renewable energy, the alternative energy piece.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. There's also a lot of biotech and pharma activity in the Northeast. I'd say that the big spot you're going to find for most of it is in New Jersey, but your second biggest spot is in Connecticut. And there is a lot of biotech research here in Connecticut. There are smaller firms that will come up with drug lines and sell those drug lines to the big pharma companies for R&D development into their pipelines, because they have to constantly be doing research work to ensure that their companies have profitable drugs coming down the pipeline into the future. So that's an area that we can look at that's going to be strong for development in the future, I think, as well.
You've got a huge list of wonderful things to work on. I'm so excited about the possibilities here in Middletown. As a newcomer, I don't have much history of where this community was 50 years ago, but I feel like the prospects for the future are pretty bright, and I'd love to help make those things happen. So do think about the college as a partner.
That's great. We look forward to working with the college. It's a critical piece of the community here.
And if people wanted to connect with you directly as mayor, because I'm assuming that they might, would they email you at
mayor@cityofmiddletown.com, and they can also call the office at 860-344-3401.
Good. That's good. Sometimes just beginning with a call to the mayor's office is a way to launch yourself in a career of political activism and community engagement. So,
well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because we have a lot of openings on city commissions and boards, and if people are interested, please get in touch with the office. We'd love to have the participation.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming to visit with us today. This has been the Middlesex Moments radio show. And if you are interested not only in learning more about the city of Middletown, but also in learning about the college, you can check our website out at mxcc.comnet. That's COMMNET.edu. I'm Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, wishing you a good day.